Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is D back again with another movie review, and this one is a long time coming for me. I've been waiting a while to watch this movie. I finally watched it about a week ago, and then a few days later I went ahead and rewatched it. So I'm doing this review based off of two viewings of the 2022 film The Batman. All right, now The Batman, the way I'm going to do this review, I'm not going to describe what the movie describe what the movie is about and all those type of things. If you're watching this video, chances are you've already watched a ton of videos and reviews and breakdowns on this movie, so I'm not going to really go into things that are pretty much already known. But what I will do is just generally talk about what I thought about this movie, and how I'm going to start this out is I'm going to talk about the 6 main characters in the film and the actors that played the roles, and just kind of what I thought briefly about how they did in those roles, or maybe not so briefly. In actuality, this is probably going to be a pretty long review compared to my other ones. You know, I got some that are 10, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, and then I got some that are like a half hour long. This is probably going to be closer to a half hour, but we will see how it goes. But I'm going to talk about the 6 main characters, and then after that, I'll just general observations and just thoughts about the film and what I generally felt about the movie. So of course, and forewarning, I'm going to be checking my focus a lot during this, so you might see me tapping my little monitor here to make sure I'm in focus. But we're going to start out with Robert Pattinson, of course. So Robert Pattinson, I thought he did a good job. I thought he did a great job, actually. I wasn't one of the folks that was going to hold the whole Twilight thing against him. In particular, well, for a number of reasons. One being, I never really saw any of the Twilight movies. I think at one point I was at somebody's home and they put the movie on, like they played the movie, but I wasn't like... It wasn't one of those things where I was really watching the movie or whatever. So, I can't really judge him based off of those films. But then beyond that, even if I had seen the movies, I mean, those were a long time ago, and people do move on to do other things. People evolve, people get older, mature, all those type of things. He's done plenty of other more mature movies since Twilight. It would be very illogical for me to hold Twilight against him for this role. Like, it doesn't really make any sense. And I would think people had learned their lesson from 1989, when there was a lot of kind of outrage over Michael Keaton playing Batman, and then lo and behold, he ended up becoming one of the more iconic incarnations of the character. So, in my mind, when it comes to this role and people are chosen to play it, you got to kind of just give it a chance to see how it plays out. Now, if you've seen the movie and you still like really hated him in it, then, to each their own. Everybody likes what they like. But for me, thought he did a good job in the role. I think from an aesthetic perspective, he had a lot going for him. He has the jawline for it. It's got the eyes for it. Definitely has the height for it. In terms of physical build, and you can tell in this movie, he put on a little muscle. He still has he has a realistic athletic build in this film. He's kind of, he's still kind of on the thinner side compared to, of course, somebody like Ben Affleck, but he doesn't look weak in this film. He just looks more like he's got a kind of a thin, more slender build, but still athletic, believable, in this film, that he's kind of doing some of the things now there are a few things where it's like, okay, you got to just suspension of disbelief. this guy's getting shot quite a bit. I know body armor does exist, but I don't know about this kind of body armor. But there are moments where you got to kind of suspension of disbelief stuff, but for the most part, it's believable that a guy built like him is doing, some of the things that he's doing. What else? And I also appreciated how he portrayed both Bruce and Batman. What he did is he basically, he was brooding either way. As Bruce Wayne, he was pretty kind of moody, angry and brooding. Obviously, same with Batman. Whereas in other live action Batman movies, Bruce will do this thing where as Batman, he's, Batman. But then when he's Bruce, he goes into his whole billionaire playboy type mode where he's flirtatious and cocky and boisterous and outgoing. And he's drinking wine and jumping in fountains with models and all those type of things. And then, but that's just a show. That's not actually the real him and where he's really at, in his mind and heart and whatnot. I kind of like that in this movie, the Batman, Bruce is just, he's brooding and angsty regardless of what he's wearing. And I think, one, I thought that was kind of a little bit more realistic, and two, it also made sense for the movie and like where this Batman was in a certain stage of his life. This Batman, this Bruce Wayne, still hasn't quite corralled all his kind of feelings and how he wants to maneuver through this whole being a vigilante scenario, what he wants to mean to the city. He hasn't truly established all of that stuff at the beginning of this film and through most of the film. He hasn't really established those things. So it really just, a lot of it just makes sense in terms of how he's portraying the character. And my final little kind of point about the whole Robert Pattinson thing, and this is kind of going back to the Twilight thing, is it is fitting that a guy who rose to superstardom playing a vampire would further that superstardom by playing and becoming Batman. It actually is very fitting, makes sense. As cheesy as it's going to sound, it's almost kind of meant to be that he would occupy this role. So my final say on Robert Pattinson is that he did a good job. And right now, as it stands right now, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going to cringe at this, but as it stands right now, his only competition for my favorite live action Batman is Michael Keaton. I know a lot of people love Ben Affleck. I'm actually not going to go deep into, because I do have my opinions regarding Ben Affleck and why his Batman isn't my favorite and things like that. This probably isn't the video for that, because it's going to make the review just that much more longer. But I do understand a lot of people love Ben Affleck. He's got a few things working against him, in my opinion. And then Christian Bale, I got to throw Christian Bale just some love, because he actually did something that nobody else has done, is he completed the trilogy, and all three films in his trilogy are, in my opinion, quality movies that are well worth a watch for Batman fans. I know people have their opinions on The Dark Knight Rises. I definitely have my opinions on The Dark Knight Rises. There are some things in The Dark Knight Rises that I really didn't like, but just when you step back at a distance and really look at the totality of all three films, and the fact that it was a trilogy that was able to be completed, and the director, filmmaker, was able to see his vision completed, to me that says something, and it is something to kind of applaud. So I got to give Christian Bale his due there. But as of right now, my favorite live action Batman, it's gonna be between Michael Keaton and Robert Pattinson. As like crazy as that might sound, that's just where I'm at right now with it. So moving on, we are going to talk about Paul Dano as the Riddler. All right, Paul Dano as the Riddler. I gotta say, and I went into this not having any issue with Paul Dano being cast, and not having any issue with the Riddler being the villain, just in general. But with that being said, I was still kind of surprised by how much I appreciated this Riddler, and how effective this Riddler actually was. This Riddler, particularly when he was in his full kind of garb, his full costume, mask and whatnot, and doing his viral videos and all of that, this Riddler was legitimately creepy and sinister. It surprised me, because going up into the movie, just the promos leading up to, we knew this was going to be a darker Batman. We knew this villain, this Riddler, was going to be a darker, more sinister Riddler, just going by the promos, the trailers, and what the director himself was saying about the film. But even with that knowledge being there, I still was surprised by how kind of sinister and creepy this Riddler came across. So I think he did a great job. And I gotta say, I never was, even when I was a little kid, I never was a fan of Jim Carrey's Riddler. It was just way too over the top. It was pretty much just Ace Ventura in a Riddler costume. And it was just, I never was a fan of his Riddler. And then his Riddler was paired with Tommy Lee Jones being over the top and goofy as well, like doing his own kind of Joker impression. So just the two of them together was just, it was madness. It was madness having those two together, portraying their roles the way they were. But so I never was a fan of Jim Carrey's Riddler. So I didn't really have a live action version of the Riddler that I was just attached to, where it's like, oh, you gotta live up to this. Like there's no Heath Ledger's Joker for the Riddler, put it like that. So that gave Paul Dano and Matt Reeves, there was a lot of room actually to be creative with this character, because if you're not going to do him exactly the way he was done in, say, Batman the animated series, which is that's where I had my most experience with the Riddler character, is through Batman the animated series. All the Batman comics I read, I don't really remember the Riddler showing up. I know he's in a lot of the comics, but I just mean it just so happens to be that a lot of the comics I read, he wasn't really featured in those. It just kind of worked out that way. So my exposure to the Riddler was through Batman the animated series, and I was not expecting, this movie to try to use the animated series as their model for creating the Riddler. So they actually had some room to really kind of mess around with this character and decide, okay, he's going to be darker, going to be more sinister and whatnot. How are we going to put that across on camera? So it's kind of interesting the route they went with him. I gotta imagine that was probably a little fun to have this iconic character that you actually have a little leeway to do in a more different fashion from an aesthetic perspective, because even though he's an iconic character, he's nowhere near the level of, say, Joker, or even, maybe even like the Penguin or something like that. So you can have some leeway to kind of dabble with him a little bit, and I like what they actually ended up doing with him. And I will say, the rat contraptions, the whole rat thing that the Riddler was doing in this film, the commissioner, obviously the commissioner, that's the commissioner before Gordon or whatever, the way he gets that kind of, the first thing I thought of when I saw that contraption on his head was the book 1984. And if you've read that book, you know what I'm talking about. And so, and it's a very effective visual, that contraption, because it's a type of visual that you don't need to see what happens. You don't need to see any gory details. Just the kind of brief, 15-second or whatever visual of the whole contraption tells you everything you need to know, and it's legitimately horrifying. And then they go, and when they get into his lair, gotta keep checking my focus here. I wonder how many times I go out of focus in this review. When they go to his lair, and you see some mock-ups where you see some other type of rat-related torture devices that he's been working on. And just seeing those devices, they're not even in use or anything, just seeing the plans in the device itself, and it speaks for itself. Just seeing the device and seeing the rats, how everything is supposed to work. And once again, it's horrifying, and it's extremely effective. You don't have to show a whole lot to get fear and terror across in a movie. And these Riddler rat kind of contraptions, these scenes, these brief moments and whatnot, were a kind of a perfect illustration of how less is oftentimes more, and at the very least, just a little bit is enough. You don't need a whole lot and a whole lot of gratuitous graphic type stuff, unless I like horror movies, unless it's that type of movie where that's kind of what you're there to see. It's a gratuitous stuff, but otherwise. But anyway, so long story short, long story a little less long, Riddler I thought was fantastic for the most part in this movie. I will say about his they tried to kind of put him in this, I guess, kind of incel position. And I'm only using that term because that's the term everybody else is using to describe it. I'm kind of reluctant on using the term because I feel like the only thing that separates within this movie, the only thing that separates Riddler and Batman to a degree, the only thing that really separates them, besides the fact that Batman is kind of in his mind at least, on the right side of the law. The only thing that separates them is that Batman eventually does start to engage with a woman in terms of Catwoman. So he starts to kind of, lean towards getting some action or whatever the case may be. If you take away Catwoman, Batman and Riddler, at least on the surface, are very much kind of in the same boat in terms of if Riddler qualifies as an incel, then Batman, at least without a woman by his side, qualifies as well, because they're both kind of engaging in the same type of, weird activity, for lack of a better term. I mean, they're both very reclusive from the public, very isolated from the public, whether it's physically or just mentally and kind of socially. They're both wearing masks. They're both most at home and most likely being themselves when they're in mask, and they go out and provide physical torment and discomfort to those that they feel are doing wrong and engaging in wrong activity. So very similar characters. So it's kind of like, it's hard for me to call Batman an incel, but if Riddler is an incel, then technically before Catwoman came into the picture, Batman must have been an incel as well. But I don't know. I don't know the complete rules to what makes somebody an incel and not. But the whole making Riddler an incel, specifically having his kind of fellow followers be his henchmen kind of at the end of the film. On one hand, I was kind of like, I wasn't quite sure if I liked it, but then on the other hand, it kind of was a clever way to give Riddler henchmen. Most bosses eventually, in movies, Joker always had his henchmen. Obviously, just throughout all the films, Bane, every villain that we've seen in Batman movies had henchmen, and this was the one villain that kind of got his henchmen through a more non-traditional fashion. I mean, they say this is supposed to be a more grounded, realistic Batman film. If you're not a super popular person already who just for some odd reason has a lot of criminals on tap ready to do dirt for you, the only way to really get a large group of people to kind of engage in an activity that you want them to engage in is going to be through some form of social media and reaching out and whatnot. So while I'm maybe wasn't the biggest fan of all of that, it actually did kind of make sense, particularly when you place it in a real world setting. So I didn't really dislike it that much, especially the more I kind of think about it. It's kind of like, I can kind of see why they went that route. Yeah, it is kind of rather practical. Everybody nowadays, when they want to throw a party or get some crowdfunding or get a large group of people together to do something, they use, online access and social media and whatnot. So I guess it makes sense. Let me move on. This is long-winded. Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman. This is going to be very brief. I liked her. What I will say is, as it stands right now, she is my second favorite live-action Catwoman. I've got her above Anne Hathaway and behind Michelle Pfeiffer. If you really want to talk about accuracy to the comics, then Zoe Kravitz, her portrayal of Catwoman in terms of live-action movies is probably, for my money, the most accurate to the comics. and just in terms of, backstory, motivations, and just all those type of things. Michelle Pfeiffer, her Catwoman in Batman Returns was very, like, to be frank, rather supernatural, almost pretty kind of blatantly supernatural. I mean, I guess if you want to say the cats kind of revived her, but the way it happened, that looked like a supernatural revival. In Batman Returns, that wasn't natural how that happened. That was supernatural. So, and that's obviously a break from the comics, at least to my knowledge. I don't remember Catwoman ever having any sort of supernatural connections in the comics, but maybe at one point she did. But so that was obviously Tim Burton taking his liberties, but just that role, the way she played that role, and just I'm biased towards Batman Returns in general, so I will admit that. But I think Michelle Pfeiffer is still the iconic Catwoman portrayal in movies. Anne Hathaway, just again, that's another case where I could do a whole video kind of going into issues I had with The Dark Knight Rises. But Anne Hathaway, nice enough actress, I guess, but just in terms of Catwoman, there's some things there where she just wasn't really the right person for the role. And then also there is a part of me that's like, that is who Christopher Nolan would pick for Catwoman. There's something about that choice, Anne Hathaway for Catwoman, that just seems like such a Christopher Nolan choice. But it is what it is. Zoe Kravitz, second favorite live action Catwoman of all time. I think she has the sex appeal. She has the believable physicality. So yeah, moving on. We got to talk about Jeffrey Wright as Gordon. I liked him in the role. I thought he did a good job. The thing is, this for somebody like Jeffrey Wright, somebody of his talent, this seemed like it was probably a relatively easy role for him to play. I think this Gordon fit perfectly in this world that this movie had going on. The detective noir energy, very heavy with this movie, and his portrayal of Gordon was perfect for that type of detective noir style. There's really nothing I would have changed about his performance in terms of what they wrote for him, everything, what they gave him to do in the film, and then what he went and did with it. I think he did exactly what needed to be done. That being said, his portrayal of Gordon is he's not as emotive as Gary Oldman. He's not as emotive as, or emotional, I guess, as Gary Oldman in the Nolan films. The Gordon in the Nolan films is just very emotional, and I don't say that in a negative fashion. He's just very emotional, very much kind of wears his heart on a sleeve in a way. I guess I'll put it like this. I feel like the Gordon in Christopher Nolan's films cries a whole lot more than the Gordon in Matt Reeves in his movie. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. And when I say cry, I don't even mean cry like, oh, he's a big baby. I just mean like there's things that will bring him to tears more naturally, even if it means it's his family or his mother or his wife or his kid or an old lady on the street or something like that. Gordon from the Christopher Nolan Batman films just seems way more like an empath, just way more kind of empathetic, outwardly showing his empathy. And the Gordon from Matt Reeves, he seems like he's just like, he's used to just living in this dark, violent world. And the only emotions he really knows are, curiosity and anger, maybe, or something like that. But anyway, so I like Jeffrey Wright's portrayal of Gordon. I thought this particular Gordon fit perfectly in this particular world. So next we're going to talk about Collin Farrell, then we're going to talk about Andy Serkis, and then that'll be the end of the character specific review type stuff. But Collin Farrell, fantastic portrayal from Collin Farrell. Just The physical performance in terms of the makeup and wardrobe, but also the vocal performance. I like the kind of the accent that he had going on, just the speech, the vocal inflections that he had going on as Oswald / the Penguin. I just very likable character. Definitely like this is like so much so that you hope this character shows up in future films. Maybe not as like a main villain. Probably he might be best suited to not be a main villain, you know, but you do want to see him in future movies. At least I do. Just kind of an interesting character. I love the way Colin Farrell kind of portrayed the role. Just an intriguing, enjoyable character when he's on screen. To go along with kind of the makeup and all of that type of stuff, and his vocal performance, the physical performance, the moment when right before the car chase starts, when Oswald is out there and he's shooting at he shoots at Batman and Catwoman. They're like by the car outside and it's raining. And Oswald, he has the gun and he's firing it off and whatnot. And he has this kind of limp. I'm probably going to get out of focus when I do this, but he has this kind of limp going on. Like he's a little hunched over. He's wearing kind of a trench coat and he's moving in a certain, like you can tell he's kind of moving with this kind of limp, this kind of hunched over limp. And it adds so much character, just this simple like limp, the way he's moving while firing this machine gun. It adds so much character to a character that already was full of character and charisma and whatnot. So yeah, just really happy with Colin Farrell's performance and what he did with the Penguin here. And I was a fan, still am a fan of Danny DeVito's Penguin in Batman Returns. I always maintain that he doesn't get enough due for that villain portrayal, because from the makeup to the performance, Danny DeVito really dives all in to that performance. Like he really just goes for it. And I've always felt he didn't get enough credit for it, so I've always been a fan of that Penguin because of just how it fit into that dark, morbid, gothic world of Batman Returns. But that Penguin is so different than this Penguin that Colin Farrell does in the Batman. The Danny DeVito's Penguin is much more theatrical and kind of operatic and just fantastical and gross and morbid and almost creature like, almost like a monster. And even within the film, they kind of frame him as a monster from the sewers. Whereas here in Matt Reeves' The Batman, the Penguin is very real world mobster. I think within this movie, he's more of like an underboss. He's not the head guy in this film, which is another thing that makes him a very intriguing character, because he's not at the top of the food chain in this movie, and which leads you to believe that he has some work and some kind of a journey to go on, a character arc to go on, to where he will move up the ranks, especially since Gotham at the end of the Batman, the flood is happening, and you learn through Batman's narration that Gotham is now, it's been plunged into chaos, and control of the streets is now up for grabs. So I say all that to just say, hey, this Penguin in the Batman, I think it's fantastic, very interesting. I hope to see more going forward. Now, Andy Serkis as Alfred. I liked him, very likable, but here's the thing. Here's the caveat with Alfred. Alfred is a very hard character to mess up. So hard, in fact, that I have yet to see Alfred get messed up in any form or fashion. He was great in the animated series, great in the Tim Burton films with, I think his name was Michael Goff, I believe was his name, and then great in the Nolan films with Michael Caine playing him, and then I like Jeremy Irons in the Snyder films playing Alfred, and then now here with Andy Serkis, I like this Alfred as well. So it's kind of like he does a great job, but it's also like kind of like they've all done great jobs. Like I've never seen an Alfred that I had an issue with in any of the Batman movies. Now, you might prefer some over others, but for the most part, they all kind of fulfill their Alfredly duties. Andy Serkis, his Alfred, I will say, if I want to kind of pin down more of what kind of Alfred his is, I think his Alfred tonally is somewhere in between Michael Caine's Alfred and Jeremy Irons' Alfred. And just this Alfred that obviously has a very, deep love for Bruce, and seen him as a child, helped raised him up, all of those things, has a very strong love, almost fatherly love for him, but is also not afraid to confront him, to challenge him, and to eventually put him in his place. So yeah, I liked Andy Serkis in this role. I do hope to see him continue to portray Alfred, because I do also feel in this movie you kind of don't get that much of Andy Serkis in this movie. You get he's in here, and he is kind of critical from an emotional perspective, and I guess even from plot perspective, because he does help in terms of solving some of the puzzles and codes and all those different types of things. He helps Bruce out a little bit there, but for the most part, he's really not in the movie as much as I think I was expecting him to be in the movie going into it, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The movie kind of plays out the way I kind of feel it needed to play out, but going forward, I do want to see Andy Serkis continue to play the role. So that is it for the kind of character focus breakdowns. Now, general observations about the movie. I love the dark detective noir mood of the film. I'm a big fan of that kind of style, that energy within movies, and this character Batman has been waiting a long time for this type of story to be put on the big screen. He's obviously, known as the world's greatest detective, and it's been talked about plenty how he doesn't get to do that much detecting in his movies, but there are, moments, if you really kind of think back in the memory banks through the different Batman movies, he does a little bit of detecting, but not that kind of boots on the ground, standing in the rain and then, showing up at the crime scene, revisiting crime scenes and all those type of things. You weren't getting that kind of detective work from him in high volume in any of the other live action movies. This movie really kind of gives you that Batman boots on the ground type vibe. I mean, showing up, him, one of the most kind of, I don't really know the term to use, but just kind of surprisingly effective scenes and just kind of, I guess, sequences or shots in the movie is when he's and it's kind of towards the beginning of the movie when he's walking into the crime scene where of the mayor's murder. He's walking in, Gordon is walking him in, leading him in. He's walking in behind Gordon. All the cops are kind of lining the walls, lining the hallways, looking at this guy coming in the cape and the Batman mask and all that type of stuff. And that really kind of showed just how deep and boots on the ground into the actual evidence examination and all of that type of stuff, walking through the murder scene, the crime scenes and whatnot, collecting samples. That all really kind of showed how deep into the detective side of things he was going to be in this movie. So it was really kind of, it was an interesting thing. Now in the Nolan film, there were moments where, Batman was kind of leaning into detective work, standing alongside Gordon, showing up at the police station to interrogate Joker. So, he is kind of there amongst law enforcement and whatnot. But just This was on a whole nother level in terms of how deep into the actual detective work Batman got to get on screen. So I really enjoyed that. I talked about how all cast members, they all delivered. I didn't have an issue with any of the cast members' actual performances. They all did great there. And something I do want to point out is that this movie, it felt very, very rich. Just very rich with like quality and details in like a world that was operating and interconnected. Like, it kind of sounds strange to say, but it felt like a world that was operating and was doing what it does regardless of whether or not you were watching it. You know, like almost as if you turn off the TV screen or you leave the theater or whatever, and that Gotham is still operating. The wheels are still churning on it. You know, it's a 3-hour movie, but I will say, as a Batman fan, a long-time Batman fan who has, you know, experienced multiple different kind of versions and styles of Batman, whether you talk about the campy stuff, the super dark type of stuff, the weird stuff, just all the different kind of incarnations of Batman. So, you know, Gotham is like a character in itself to me. Like, Gotham itself is a character, and knowing so much about Batman, for me, there wasn't really any chance to actually be bored throughout this 3-hour runtime, because everything was interesting to me. Like, background stuff was interesting to me, because I was watching how you know, certain details, certain nuance type things. There were things that I didn't necessarily catch the first time I watched the movie, because I was paying attention to something else in the frame, and then I caught something else. And so it was like, even though it's a 3-hour movie, in my opinion, if you're, let me just, you know, for me, I'll just say for me, because we can all be Batman fans. I'm not going to say what a real Batman fan should like and all that type of stuff. That makes no sense. But for me, as a very strong Batman fan, there was no room for me to be bored, because there was so much going on that I connected with, or kind of sparked a thought, or sparked a memory from a comic, or sparked a memory from the animated series, or from one of the other movies, or, you know, just generalized Gotham City lore and whatnot, was just kind of all over the place in this film. So even though it was 3 hours, wasn't really any chance for me to actually get bored. And to go along again with the whole 3-hour run thing, it's 3 hours, but I thought the pacing was really well done for a 3-hour film. Like the way they kind of, some of the bigger action set pieces, the way they kind of spaced certain things out, you know, you don't really go just too long of a time. You don't really go too long of a time without getting a burst of action, a burst of kind of adrenaline, if you will. And then there's a just overall kind of dread and tension that goes throughout pretty much the whole, at least the first 2 hours of the film, the first half of the movie, and then the middle portion as well, at least up until Dano, the Riddler, gets taken into custody. And even then, there's still some tension to be had when, when he starts talking about his plan and whatnot that he has for the city and things like that. So I thought for a 3-hour movie, because I was very, when I find out a movie is 3 hours, it's very, it's discouraging. I am not a fan of a 3-hour film. Now, there's been a lot of 3-hour movies or close to 3-hour movies that I ended up really liking. But just initially, when I hear a movie is 3 hours, it's not really the best thing. But I gotta say, this movie, people like to say it didn't feel like 3 hours. It felt like 3 hours, but it was like an enjoyable 3 hours. It was like a 3 hours that I was like, okay, it was 3 hours, but I liked the 3 hours. I'll put it like that. So, kudos to all of that, how they did that. And of course, the movie is better the second time. I actually think that's usually, maybe it's not usually the case with the movie you liked the first time, because a lot of people will like a movie the first time, and then the second time they start noticing all kinds of shit that they don't like and whatnot. So I guess it's not always the case, but I liked the movie the first time I saw it. Watching it a second time really gave me a chance to kind of settle down and like actually catch a few things, because the first time you watch it, you're kind of excited. There's a little bit of adrenaline. You've been waiting a long time to see this movie, big time Batman fan. So it's almost like the excitement of just getting the chance to watch the movie can sometimes, cloud and fuzzy up your ability to capture details and all of these different things. So a second viewing can always really solidify where you truly stand, and I like the movie even more so after the second viewing. So very big positive there. And I will say, along with Batman Returns, this movie, The Batman, is the darkest Batman movie that I've seen. Perhaps even darker than Batman Returns, because Batman Returns, for how kind of dark it is, for how kind of innuendo filled it is, and for how morbid it is, and sometimes even gross that it is, it still has a childlike quality. There's an air of kind of innocent magic in the movie. Like, it's still, and I think Danny Elfman's score is a big part of that. Danny Elfman's score is just very kind of naturally magical as well. When you hear that score, you don't think hard R, not for children movie. When you hear the Danny Elfman score, you think almost of just movie magic in a way, and kind of suitable for all audiences, kind of comes with that. Even though Batman Returns is very much a PG-13 morbid, probably shouldn't take little kids to see it type film, it still has, there's an air of like PG-13 child like magic to it. The Batman, on the other hand, is just straight up like, it feels like just straight up, this is for adults, it's mature, it's violent, it's dark, it's disturbing. It doesn't feel like any part of it is meant for kids at all. So Batman Returns is a lot more weird, a lot more morbid perhaps, but The Batman, I think, just overall is a darker film just in totality. Tim Burton is a weird director in that way, where he somehow can bring together the adult and the childlike, just kind of innocent movie magic type energy, and mix that with a kind of weird morbid adult thing as well, and it is able to kind of coexist within the same film. So it's a weird thing there. The Batman is blatantly adult and mature to its core. There's no this is for children energy. There's no this is for children energy anywhere in The Batman. But yeah, Batman Returns and The Batman, to me, are the two darkest Batman movies that have ever been put out, so far. Also, I gotta talk about the Batmobile. I thought it was actually a good decision to only have the Batmobile show up in one scene. I thought that gave the Batmobile a kind of mythical type, like it gave it a stronger aura to have it only show up in one scene. And then, the scene that it does show up in is a fantastic, super strong scene and moment in the movie. So I thought that was fitting, and it goes into just the kind of the craftsmanship is all over the place in this film. Like, you can see craftsmanship all over the movie, just in terms of choices. There's areas of this movie where you can see the restraint, and the restraint on certain scenes creates impact. I talked about it with the rat contraption scene and different things like that, where it's like, just showing a little bit can tell you all you need to know, and that can have immense impact. That was an element of the craftsmanship that was very evident in this movie. Is restraint here, only giving a little bit here, because that's all that's actually needed. Blurring having certain moments be out of focus. There was a lot of that going on, having certain things be obscured or be out of focus, but you're still watching it, but it's out of focus, so you can't really, even though you're looking directly at it, you're not actually seeing all of the details and whatnot, and that adds to the tension, that adds to the horror and the mystery of things. So them kind of using the Batmobile extremely sparingly, I think, was a good idea. Through most of this movie, when Batman is kind of moving around, if he has to hit the road, it's on a bike, on a motorcycle. And then he has this one scene where he breaks out the beast, he breaks out the Batmobile, and it is a highly effective moment. So I thought they did a good job there. My last little, I could go on and on with just little kind of just moments and things and details that I liked about this movie. My last thing that I'm going to point out before I close this review out is there's a moment where Batman, he's just finished kind of talking to Gordon and Selena Kyle. And Selena Kyle, she ran off to, I guess, go after Falcone or whatever. And then Batman, tosses a phone to Gordon, and then Batman's gonna go do what he has to do. And so I forgot I don't know if you just call it repelling, if it's just traditional repelling, but he does the thing where he puts the hook or whatever, and then he walks down the side of the building. He's like horizontal, just walking down. I can't do it with my fingers, but he's walking down the side of the building, standing horizontal, and just walks directly down, instead of what you would normally see in a lot of traditional live action Batman movies. Is you would see just some sort of vertical movement where he's feet, toes pointed towards the ground, and he does a swan dive or something like that. This was a very unexpected way for him to get down the side of a building. Like, I wasn't expecting him to do it in this fashion, even though this fashion was rather practical. But I was also thinking, besides just looking unique and just looking cool and kind of seeing Batman travel in a way and seeing Batman repel in a way that I hadn't seen him repel before, it also, I was thinking, I wonder, was this kind of like a callback to, if you remember back in the 60s, the 60s Batman show, Batman and Robin, when they would have to climb a building, and they'd have this shot where they have the rope, and you see, and this is, let me get my monitor right. This is the building, and then Batman and Robin are just, walking up the side of the building, and there's windows right here and all that type of stuff. I felt like this was kind of maybe paying homage to that in a way, but just instead of Batman, walking up a building, they had him walking down a building. But I might just be thinking too much into it, and they might have just said, hey, we need Batman to repel, and that's how they had him do it. But I like to think they also had the 60s TV show in mind when they put all that together. All right, so I'm gonna close this review out here because I gotta check. I did a lot of filming for this, and I feel like a lot of this footage might be out of focus, so I gotta check and see how things turn out. I'm gonna close the review out here. My final takeaway from this, though, is that, or for the Batman, is that this was fantastic. This lived up to what I wanted it to do. It hit all the beats I wanted it to hit, or at the very least was told that it would hit. The movie delivered on what the trailers told me I was going to get. That's essentially how I feel. A lot of times there's anticipation for movies. We always have movies where, there's build up and there's anticipation, and so often, in fact, I might say usually, the movies don't really live up to the anticipation or the build-up. And I gotta say, for me, this movie lived up to the build-up. It lived up to my anticipation. I'm very satisfied. I bought the movie. Very happy that I bought the movie, because this is definitely a movie that, I've only owned it maybe a week or so, and I've already watched it twice. This is a movie that I will watch multiple times, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be one of those movies where I might just watch a section of it. I might watch the first half of it and then turn it off and go to the store, go do something or whatever. And it's kind of one of those. And that's how I am with movies. Once I watch a movie front to back multiple times, then I get into that mode where I'm just like, let me watch 30 minutes of it and then turn it off. Let me watch this scene and then I turn it off or whatever. So, this is a movie that is going to get some burn. It's going to get some burn. In terms of all-time Batman movies, where I rank this is kind of tough to say, but this is really, really towards the top. Like, right now, it's at least top 2 for me. It may be number 1. I've always said I have this affinity for Batman Returns. There's a lot of nostalgia there with Batman Returns, and nostalgic energy is very powerful energy. And then The Dark Knight. The more I think of this movie, the Batman made me think about The Dark Knight quite a bit, actually. And it was like, I might need to rewatch The Dark Knight again, because I don't want to place The Dark Knight too low. Right now, I have The Dark Knight in terms of just overall Batman movie. I have The Dark Knight at least, I want to say probably second. Now, in terms of just Batman movies that are that are in my favorite, The Dark Knight is probably about third right now. The Batman is either second or first. As it stands right now, down the line, maybe that could change. Maybe I'll watch the Batman on the 4th viewing of the Batman. Maybe something will hit me where all of a sudden I don't like it or something. I don't know. But as it stands right now, the Batman 2022, very highly rated. So that is it for the review. Obviously, I recommend this to Batman fans. There's just, if you're a Batman fan, I feel like you have to check this out. Now, I will say I haven't watched a whole lot of, most of the reviews I've watched have been ones where the people were pretty much praising the film. I haven't really read or watched a lot where people are trashing the movie, though I do know if I were to judge by comment sections, I know there's people out there that think the movie's trash, or at least are willing to type that they think it's trash. So I know people feel how they feel about the movie, but as of right now, for me, very, very highly rated Batman film. I think they did an excellent job here. It's something to be proud of. The ending of the movie, to me, is very well done. It reminds me a little bit of the ending to The Dark Knight, in the way that, both endings he's essentially on a bike, and both have that end in kind of the same way, where it's like this energetic, where you kind of feel like Batman is going someplace, like the story is going someplace, and we're going to get to see where the story continues and goes further down the line. When the Dark Knight ended, at least for me, I don't remember what the whole, what people were saying or what the story was about, whether they were going to do a trilogy or whatever the case may be. But I remember when the Dark Knight ended, it felt like, okay, there's going to be more. There's going to be something else down the line. We're going to get another story, another adventure. And this ended in a similar fashion, with the same type of energy, where it's like, okay, where is this gonna go? We're gonna get to see some more adventures with these characters in this world. So, like how the movie ended, all of that stuff. So that is it, you guys. I recommend this movie to Batman fans, of course. Check it out. That is it for this very long review. I told you at the beginning it was gonna be a long review. So, as always, more reviews, more videos, and whatnot to come. And until the next time, I will catch you on the next go round.